This conference will now be recorded.
District, April 26, 2021 at 1 p.m. I am Harold Williams, President of the Board, and I will call the board meeting to order. And we have determined that we have a quorum, and we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Scott Houston, Treasurer of the Board.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. So everybody, if you'll stand and place your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which is one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That moves us to item 4 on the agenda, public comments. Mr. General Manager.
Yes, President Williams, good afternoon. Good afternoon, members of the board and the public. I do have a public comment request here from Mr. Craig Cadwallader, and it's in relationship to item 8A. And I suggest that we take that up when we get to that item on the action calendar, 8A.
That would be appropriate.
Okay. We will come back to Mr. Cadwallader at that point.
Okay, very good. Next item is presentations. Any presentations?
President Williams, we do not have any presentations.
How about items too late to be agendized?
I have not received any requests for items too late to be agendized.
Okay, then that takes us to the consent calendar, and I will give control of the agenda to you.
Oh, we're on the consent calendar, so somebody wants to move that.
I'll move it to the consent calendar. Director Deere.
I'll second. Director
All right.
Deere.
It's been moved and seconded that the consent calendar be approved. What is the wishes of the council? Excuse me, the board.
You get the boy out of the farmer, not the city out of the boy or something.
So then, no questions. We'll go for a roll call, please. Director Gray.
Yes.
Director Alvarez.
Yes, I would like to make one comment regarding item C on the consent calendar, the Palos Verdes Recycled Water Pipeline Project. When that was moved forward by the E&O committee, it was noted that there's $5 million of funding available. Overall project cost is 12.9 million, and that we would seek to find additional grant fundings working with federal and state agencies and for making up the difference when this goes to construction. Also would like to encourage that maybe we go back to the golf course and ask them for a contribution to the pipeline project itself, not just for money for conversion of their facilities.
Director Alvarez, it would be appropriate for you to pull this item off consent.
Well, that would be my only comment.
Your only comment. Well, then the motion is to approve the item as it appears on the agenda, and that's what we're voting on.
I'm not asking for any changes. I'm just asking that be noted.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you. All right, and how about Director Houston?
Yes.
Director Deere?
Yes.
Director Williams, I'm a yes. So the consent calendar is approved. That takes us to item number 8, action calendar.
Correct. So if I may, President Williams, I'll go ahead and introduce this item then.
Would you please?
Yeah, so this will, first of all, I think we'll, this went through as an action item on our water policy and ledge committee, and after some discussion was asked to be brought back as an action item with more information from staff regarding the opponents to the project and any other details, including the lawsuits, which we'll cover here in a second. But before we do that, this is where Mr. Craig Cadwallader had, this is the item that he wished to address under public comment. So President Williams, is it okay for Mr. Cadwallader to speak?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, President Williams, board members and staff. This is Craig Cadwallader, and I have been heavily involved in the Ballona Wetlands Restoration Project for, I think, over a decade now. And I think it's a very good project for many, many reasons, a lot of which is outlined in the recommended letter of support. And I very much encourage the board to approve a letter of support to be sent as shown in attachment A and support this project. It's good for water quality issues. It's good for educational issues. There's a lot of people who've never seen some of the wildlife in the Ballona wetlands. I do water sampling for Surfrider South Bay in the treatment wetlands there, and I always see very exotic wildlife. And when we take students out there, some of them have never seen some of this wildlife. So restoring the wetlands to its healthier state, it's highly degraded now, is very much needed and very much appropriate. So I strongly encourage the board to support this letter of support for the restoration project. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments? So, all right, this goes to the board. What is the pleasure of the board?
President Williams, I do have a report by E.J. Caldwell as a follow-up to the Water Policy and Ledge Committee questions, if we could hear that first.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick, members of the board and guests today. The item before you is the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve Project. And as mentioned in the board memo on packet page 119, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has prepared and certified an environmental impact report for the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve Project, which is intended to enhance and establish native coastal wetlands and upland habitat on nearly 566 acres south of Marina del Rey and east of Playa del Rey. As mentioned, West Basin was contacted by several different stakeholders requesting West Basin consider adopting a support position on the project. And as such, staff is bringing this memo forward for the board to consider adopting a position on the Ballona Wetlands project. It's important to note, I know that our previous speaker did mention the draft letter of support. It is important to note that staff does not have a recommendation on this item, but did prepare a potential letter of support in case the board wanted to move there. Having heard the item at West Basin's Water Policy and Legislation Committee, we did perform a little bit of additional research as far as answering some of the questions that came about during that committee meeting. One of which was an outline of kind of who's supporting this program and project, and that was fairly easy to do. As noted, I think, by one of our speakers, the supporters are many in the environmental stakeholder community, the Loyola Marymount Center for Urban Resilience, the Ballona Creek Renaissance, Environment California, Environment Action Committee of West Marin, Friends of Ballona Wetlands, Friends of Madrona Marsh, LA Waterkeeper, Surfrider Foundation, the River Project, Ocean Conservancy, Heal the Bay, Audubon, California, and Palos Verdes South Bay Audubon, to name a few. According to their websites, they do have an action calendar or available support list so that any individual can also sign a letter of support or be added. And it seemed like they had numerous individuals in support. In reviewing that website, I did notice that there were no public agencies or municipalities that are listed on their website as far as supporting the project. One of the other questions was related to opposition to the project. And I think one of our speakers did mention that there were either potential litigation or possible litigation in progress. And so I wanted to note that there are, I believe, 3 lawsuits filed challenging the environmental impact report. One came from Defend Biona Wetlands. Second has 2 joint plaintiffs, Grassroots Coalition, as well as the Biona Ecosystem Education Project. And the third that I was able to identify is the Biona Wetlands Land Trust. And all of these items or all of these lawsuits were seeking to vacate the certification of the environmental impact report, challenging it as deficient as far as meeting state and federal law. So I think that primarily answers most of the questions. However, I do know that Director Gloria Gray did ask questions related to the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission. As a member of the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, West Basin Municipal Water District as an agency has voted on action items and funding that impact the region. However, the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission has not taken a position on this project and the specific program as adopted in the certified EIR. They have in the past actually provided some comments related to the preferred alternative, which ultimately was the project that was identified in the certified EIR. And secondly, it is worth noting that through a grant from the Coastal Commission, or excuse me, the Coastal Conservancy, the Bay Foundation did provide technical assistance in relation to the findings and portions of the EIR that ultimately was certified. So I believe, based off of my notes from committee, that answered all of the questions, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions that the board might have.
Questions from the board?
Mr. President, this is Director Gray.
Director Gray?
Thank you. Thank you, EJ, for that report, and you did answer my questions. I have some additional questions, I suppose. I know you did not mention any public agencies, and I don't know if this is a question to you or maybe someone, maybe I see Mr. I think Jim is on the line, right? So maybe someone can answer. Have you asked for support from other public agencies? And if you have, what is the reluctance to not doing that? So maybe you can answer that question, if that's okay, Mr. President, if I can ask.
Yes.
Jim?
Yes, go ahead.
He's muted, I believe.
You're on mute. Unmute yourself, please.
Jim?
He can't hear.
I have no control over the mute.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Kennedy, you're not muted on our end. There you go.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Director Gray, for letting me speak at this time. So at the other agencies would be it's a self-certified EIR with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So there's no other agencies that weigh in. There's no agencies that I know of that have come out, that would. So the federal Fish and Wildlife has come out in support, and there would be no other agencies that would normally weigh in. The question before this committee, I believe, would be on what impacts overlay with your mission as a water agency on water control, other kind of mitigations for stormwater runoff, CMDLs. So that I wouldn't necessarily say that your expertise is in the realm of restoration. So on whether or not the restoration is good or not, it would be whether or not this restoration affects the water quality that you oversee.
Okay, thank you. Well,
Sure.
thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Then it kind of goes back to my question to the agency, because we're only looking at it from a water quality perspective. And so I know that this agency, you have not provided a recommendation to the board, but based on just what Mr. Kennedy has said and why we would even be looking at this, what can you give us a recommendation or some perspective on what we should do with the request? Ask Mr. Shield.
Thank you, Director Gray. Yeah, of course, it's definitely part of our mission to always have the interest of water quality and protection of the environment be part of our core mission, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's directly related to what we do. In maybe a broader general sense, you could say it is. So I think that's maybe why maybe not of other agencies, maybe public agencies aren't really, water agencies anyway, aren't really weighing in on this. So, you know, I don't have a recommendation one way or another. I don't think it hurts or helps our mission. I think I'm neutral on the project itself because it's a long way out and I don't know, the specifics. So you've heard from Mr. Kennedy and the folks and from Craig and from EJ. And EJ, I know you have some other information there you might want to share on this one.
Well, the only thing I can add is that West Basin obviously has not just dedicated a lot of resources, but really worked hard to reduce and minimize any urban water runoff, especially dry weather runoff, through water use efficiency, and obviously our educational aspects of promoting native landscaping, which always impacts and helps and assists with water quality. This does not impact water supply by any means, as Mr. Cadwallader mentioned. He has invested a lot of time in himself as far as water quality testing and testing the water that enters into the wetlands and of course exits the wetlands. There is a benefit as far as our ocean discharge and stormwater actually reaching the ocean. So there are benefits there. West Basin is dedicated to environmental stewardship. So we've been very proactive there. But in terms of this program or this project, it does not really impact West Basin's overall mission as stated in all of our documents and our charges, if you will, as a municipal water district. But we are a valued stakeholder in the region. So we've added a lot of benefits, I think, to the area. I do think that there are a lot of public agencies that are allowing this process to play out. Obviously, the environmental impact report has been challenged in a court of law, and so those 3 lawsuits would need to wind their way through the judicial system. So with that, staff doesn't really have much more to add unless you have any additional questions, but no recommendation at this time.
Yeah. The only other question is, I know the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission as a board or a commission is not taking a position. So even though they're supporting it through other means, is this going to come before the Santa Monica board for a position? Jim? Mr. Kennedy, do you know, or anyone?
To my knowledge, the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission did consider potentially taking a position a few years back. Actually, I believe one chair ago brought it forward to see if the commission had a collective position or input. It was my understanding that at that time, and I did have a chance to speak with Dr. Guangyu Wang prior to this meeting, just to recollect my memory. But it was decided at that time that the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission would not take a position, but did provide input on the environmental impact report as to the preferred alternative project.
So if we as one of the agencies as part of the commission took a position on it, would that be in conflict of what the commission is doing, or the commission's position?
I don't believe it would be in conflict, but it was noted in my conversation with Dr. Wang, is that obviously any individual member of the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, especially as an individual, as a person, as a community stakeholder, just as our board could do, any member of the West Basin Board of Directors could actually sign into their website and individually support the project, which would be one option if we didn't want to have the agency take a collective effort.
Yeah. And what are the positions that one can take on on something like this? Tell the board again.
Well, simply they're collecting letters
No.
of support or a list of supporters. Obviously, there's no, I could not find a stakeholder effort that was collecting or gathering opposition or a list of opposition. But clearly you can see from the litigation, there are some that are in opposition to the project.
No, I meant the different positions that a board can take on any legislation or project. Is it watch, oppose, support, as amended, whatever? What are the different options that we have?
In the past, West Basin's Board of Directors have approved a number of positions, as you just mentioned, all the way from a support position to a support if amended, to a watch, to oppose unless amended, and to an oppose. So you would have the corner ends there, the bookends of support or oppose.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Those were my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, directors?
I have a question. I'm just curious because staff read us all the folks who are supportive and maybe some who are not, but why was there not a list provided in the memo or something in writing to us on that?
I believe the memorandum that's included in the packet was prepared prior to us obtaining that list. As you'll recall, one of the speakers at that committee meeting did provide an access to a website that includes several different logos. Again, the website is actually quite well done, and it does provide an option to sign in and add your name. But the collective list of that of who is doing that did not look to be readily available to the general public or the users of that website. So this is just a list of the logos that were collected and placed on their website. So as you pointed out, this is not a collective, all-encompassing list that support the project.
Okay, it really doesn't tell me a lot, but I'm not gonna probably have time to go look at websites and figure all that out. I thought that the ask was for staff to bring back a roster, which you did verbally, but not in writing. So at this point, it really is, we have the information. So as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to move the item forward. I'd like to make a motion that we write a letter of support or, support this project as has been asked. So I'll make the motion.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to write a letter of support. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'd like to just offer a friendly amendment to it. I do supporting the project, but I also would like to kind of watch the project because I know there's some litigation going on, right, Mr. Kennedy? I think someone, maybe EJ, reported on that. So I think it's wise for us to watch the activities of that project moving forward. And so I'd like to amend it, and my motion was going to be support with a watch position on it. And so I think we should watch it moving forward. So I do support the project, and I think we need to watch the activities of it. So because I do think it affects water quality, even though it's not water supply, but water quality is very important to what we do. And so I'd like to offer that as a friendly amendment to the motion to support it.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair?
Chair, yes, that sounds like a, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a little bit of rules of order. So the original motion by Director Houston was to support the initiative at this time. Director Gray's proposal to essentially to Director Houston is the friendly amendment to amend his motion to make it a watch position essentially instead of a support position. So if Director Houston wants to amend his motion, he may. If he does not, then Director Houston's motion will be before the board.
Mr. Counsel, my amendment was to support it, but to also watch it. Can we do both? It was to support it, but we needed to watch what happens with it. So it is to support the project, but to watch the project as it moves along.
Thank you for that clarification, Director Gray. I just want to make sure that your motion also includes because Director Houston's motion was actually to draft a letter of support in support of the initiative. And so is your motion to not only support the letter to the letter of support, but also to continue to watch this item?
Yes, that's my motion, but to include, whatever language in the letter that we will continue to watch it and would like to be apprised of the activities as it moves forward. Yes.
And Director Houston, do you understand the terms of the proposed amendment?
Mr. President, can I say something before?
Just a minute,
Just to clarify on Director Gray's comment.
just a minute, Director Houston, Alvarez. Go ahead, finish.
Okay, so
I just want to make sure.
we would issue a letter of support as pretty much written.
Just a minute, Director Alvarez. I want to let the legal counsel finish.
Okay, yeah, I was just wanted to clarify with Director Houston. He understands that his motion was to write a letter of support, and Director Gray wants an amendment to them, or is proposing an amendment to the motion to support the letter writing, but also to instruct staff to watch this issue moving forward.
I do understand, although I'm confused because it's a project and not legislation. So I'm going to just hold where I'm at the moment because I would like further discussion.
Thank you.
Steve, to me, that sounds like Director Gray was offering up a substitute motion. Is that right, Director Gray?
Well, I defer to Steve. Is that substitute or is that friendly? I don't know the protocol.
Yeah, it's to me, it was when a friendly amendment is a proposal to the maker of the motion to alter that motion, as opposed to a substitute motion, which is usually a motion to table or to take a different action than that proposed by the original motion. So my understanding of what Director Gray was proposing was a proposal to Director Houston to amend his motion with this addition of having staff track this issue after the letter of support goes out.
Thank you. And that summarizes exactly what I'm saying, just to track the issue. It's to support it, but for the board to just be aware of how the process, what the progress is. And so that was the intent of the friendly amendment. But if the president thinks it's more appropriate to do a substitute motion, I can do that also. So whatever's appropriate. It's just to track the project.
Director Alvarez.
I was just, for clarification purposes, I'm going to ask Director Gray that the letter of support would be issued as written, or with maybe some minor edits. And then in terms of just the watching the project, that periodically, maybe every 6 months or once a year, that the staff would come back and let us know where things are with respect to litigation, or as the project moves forward to construction once it's beyond litigation.
Absolutely, that was the intent, is just to track it, whatever the frequency is, and we get a report from our legislative person every month or whatever, maybe it's every 6, whatever's appropriate, the time frame, but to track it.
Director Houston.
Yes, I accept that. Yes.
Okay.
And
So
Director Williams, you need just make sure that the person who seconded the original motion is okay with that amendment.
And who seconded that? That was
I did. I'm okay with that.
Alvarez.
Thank you.
Alvarez. Okay, so can you, Steve, read the motion so that it's clear?
Sure, the motion that's now before the board as amended is a motion by Director Houston, seconded by Director Alvarez, to write a letter of support to the project and to instruct staff to track the progress of the project and to report back as the staff feels necessary to advise the Board of Developments on the project.
Okay, ready to vote? Director, did I hear something? Director Gray,
Yes.
Director Alvarez,
Yes.
Director Houston,
Yes.
Director Deere,
He's on the phone with our board secretary right now, having some technical issues.
okay. Then he's not voting then? He can't vote? All right, then we'll go to Director Williams, and that's a yes. So we have 4 yeses. Okay, so that it passes. Thank you.
I do have a quick question. Well, maybe it's a request, more like staff could send the board a copy of the letter when it goes out. So thank you.
Yes. Very good, thank you.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that.
Okay, our next item is item 8B. Mr. General Manager.
Okay, that was just Director Deere saying he was voting yes for that while he's trying to figure out his technical issues. Next item on the agenda is
8B.
B, amend operational technical support services agreement. Yeah, this went before the E&O committee, and it pertains to one of our consultants, Separation Processes, Inc., who perform technical support services in conjunction with another sub-consultant, Hazen Sawyer, mostly for low and high pressure membranes and other process-related activities for the recycled water program. There was a request by staff to amend the agreement W2876 for another year from July 1 of 2021 to June 30th of 2022, and add an additional $150,000 to the budget for those services, and some of which were delayed during the pandemic. And so we had a discussion at the E&O committee meeting, and one of the questions that was raised by Director Alvarez was to change the recommendation to say that recognize that the $150,000 would be encumbered rather than just put into the next year's budget. So we did have our CFO, Manager of Finance, Margaret Mosier, reach out to our auditors and other financial folks. And Margaret, if you'd, it's a recommendation from staff is to keep the recommendation as it was originally written, but I'll let Margaret speak to that. And we also have Scott Mano, I think, here from the auditor's office on call.
Yes, thank you for your time. Yes, I did reach out to our district auditors to ask him this question as it relates to us. So under the fiscal impact, we did add some additional language as it relates to just the fact that we are a business enterprise fund, and that how a business enterprise fund work, and that encumbrances is not a normal practice of business enterprise funds. Something that is more familiar, if you will, with city governments, if you will. I did invite Scott Mano, who's an audit partner from Rogers Anderson Malady Scott, RAMS for short, so that if there are any additional questions, he would be happy to get online to further explain this criteria.
Okay. So,
this is Don here. I'm back.
Okay, Don, thank you.
Welcome back. So what is the recommendation then?
So if I could clarify, so based off of the input received from the auditors, we are leaving the recommendation as stated at the E&O committee, And that is just that it's stated there that the board authorized the general manager to amend Agreement W2876 with Separation Processes, Inc. for operational technical services and increase the support services budget by $150,000 for a total not to exceed amount of $750,000 and extend the agreement by 1 year through June 30th, 2022. So again, the recommendation was as written at the E&O meeting earlier this month.
Okay, now, board members, you've heard the report and the recommendation.
I move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Director Gray that the recommendation be approved.
I'll second.
And it's been seconded by Director Deere. Now, questions? Questions are hearing none. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And I'll do the roll call.
Mr. Chair, we need a roll call.
Director Gray,
Yes.
Director Alvarez,
Yes.
Director Houston,
Yes.
Director Deere,
Yes.
Director Williams, yes. The motion carries. Next item.
Okay, thank you, President Williams. That brings us to the end of our action calendar. And we now move into the information calendar where we have 3 items. The first one is an oral update. I had a request, I believe, from Director Alvarez to report on the status of the recycled water distribution system O&M request for proposals. It's a bid that's been out on the street and the bids came in or closed on Friday, I believe, Friday afternoon sometime. And they will be reviewed by staff and interviews will be scheduled, and we'll bring something back to the board at that point for approval. So if there are any other questions, I'm here to answer them.
Okay. Questions? Next item, please.
Thank you. This item here entitled Historical Rates and Charges Adjustments, another oral update. This was at the request of President Williams, who asked staff to sort of do a review over, I think the time frame is the last 5 years, to see, to evaluate the level of comment or to any rate adjustments that we had from our ratepayers or from our retailers. And I had Amy Rocha, our manager of communications, do a review on this. And one, she's going to do a little report right now. There you are, Amy. We did get a letter last year. I think you all got it from California Water Service, which was ultimately a request. It was sent in May during the pandemic, a request to consider freezing the rates for 6 months through the end of 2020, and then reconsider the increases. That was the most, it wasn't a comment against the rates, it was a request to freeze the rates, which they sent out to all of their customers in California. And of course you'll recall, or maybe you don't, but we did have significant hiring deferrals through the end of last year while we evaluated the impact of COVID. And Marcus on here, I think our cost containment savings were in the area of $5.3 million. So Amy, do you want to, what did you find in your literature search? And
sure.
Generally, how
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and good afternoon, members of the board. So just to add on to what Patrick's already added in terms of public comment at meetings or submissions as it relates to public meetings, very minimal response or comment, of either positive, neutral, negative sentiment. In addition to the letter from Cal Water that was mentioned, we also held numerous customer agency workshops, and we've not, heard from any strongly negative or comments from the public or our retailers in the past 5 years. And then in addition, we looked into just media stories to see what have been covered. And there have been no articles or coverage dedicated to West Basin's budget or rates. There have been a few articles in the past year that maybe have mentioned West Basin's role in, being the wholesaler, as the specific cities have considered their rate increases. For example, El Segundo and the city of Hawthorne had been covered in the El Segundo Herald and the Daily Brief. But other than that, a lot of our information is publicly available on our website. We have our budget presentations. We have our dates of our workshops. We included such things as budget updates in our e-newsletter. So the process and the presentation is well documented in terms of being open to public availability. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, that concludes our oral report. Just generally that we didn't see hardly any sort of negative comment on our rates and charges adjustment over the past 5 years.
Okay, then takes us to the next item 9C.
Okay, President Williams. Yeah, item 9C. This is an item that went to the PI committee back, I believe, on April 8th. And there was a discussion really, I'm going to have Amy cover this as well, but there was a discussion around one particular event, mainly the Water Harvest Festival, and whether we should hold it in person or not hold it, or have some alternatives virtually, one-day events or virtual ones that are over multiple days. And there was a sentiment of that an in-person event at that particular meeting, attended by 3 of the board members here today, an in-person event would not be a good idea, and to focus on a one-day virtual event, plan for that. So we're bringing it back here so that staff can get direction on which way with all 5 board members here, and we can plan accordingly. And Amy, would you like to add anything to that, please?
No, I mean, I think it's really just open discussion. I am prepared to talk a little bit about some of the staff recommendations based on the one-day virtual event with some fun activities planned. I know we were planning to come back at May committee to discuss further. So I'm happy to kind of share what we've have to date. I have some numbers in terms of budget as it relates to that. But again, I know the real discussion here is, whether the virtual one-day event is the path we want to go on. And then again, just a reminder that what we presented at the district, as far as the event goes at committee, it was, discussion whether to cancel to hold the in-person event as regularly scheduled, or the virtual one-day event, which what staff is currently looking to do.
Okay. All right, Mr. General Manager, what are you seeking from the board today that you could not get the other day?
Okay, well, we got some pretty good direction, but if, like I said, in the interest of planning and just understanding clear direction beyond just planning, timely planning, whether what's the board's appetite? This could be moved, and Steve, if required, we could move this to being an action calendar item if somebody makes that motion. But basically, to give us direction to do a virtual event, a virtual one-day event, or not. Let us know what's the board's preference. That's really what we're looking for.
So, Steve?
Mr. President, I have a question. Are we talking about the water festival in the fall?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. I would hope that would be done in person and not a virtual event, but I do have a question. Have we been doing virtual events to date as a district?
Yeah, like this one, but I think training. Amy, do you want to address that, what you're doing in terms of virtual stuff?
Yes, I mean, as far as our school education programs has been virtual, and our community general public programs have been virtual. We have not done a festival of this scale virtually. Last year, the board, came to consensus to cancel it just in an abundance of caution with the pandemic. So this would be our first year to really decide on what we want to do.
So what would be one example of a virtual event that you've done specific?
Oh, well, especially that's a great question, because that's what we were taking notes on in terms of looking at, how we would possibly format or program the virtual event. And so two examples are, we work with the aquarium in Manhattan Beach. They provide virtual tours and show the animals to the student population. So that's a potential virtual activity and educational program that we do now that we could incorporate into a virtual festival. Similarly, at the regular festival, we do stage shows and we have performers. This year, we've started to work with a partner called the Wildwoods Foundation, and they do a very dynamic, in-person, friendly, fun, kid-oriented water education program about where our water comes from and whatnot, water cycle elements, and they currently offer that to our school programs virtually as well. So those are two resources that we are experienced doing that we could bring in. And then similarly, there's on our webinars, our Know Your H2O, we work with a GoToMeeting platform, GoToWebinar platform, and we have the ability to do polls and ask questions and engage with our audience. So that's some of the experience we've gained, in the past year moving into virtual platforms in this pandemic era.
More specifically, what's a current virtual event that we West Basin conducted?
Most recently was last Wednesday's firescaping webinar. That was targeted toward the Palos Verdes Peninsula, and we had a number of partners present. That was more of a general public adult audience, but again, it took a lot of coordination. We had a guest speaker, we had guest speakers from the fire department, we had city participation. We put it out, we marketed it widely to the peninsula, and that was hosted in-house. So that's a recent example, and same with Where Your Water Comes From, Know Your H2O, as well as our virtual field trips of the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility, which our education department staff lead regularly. Like, for example, they have 4 scheduled this week for schools. So we're regularly offering virtual tours and webinar programming.
On a virtual tour like of the Ed C. Little, how many people actually participated?
You know what, I will ask. I'm actually, hopefully Daryl is on the line to give a most recent number. I know it ranges. Those are typically held on a Saturday that we offer to the general public. Oh, thank you, Daryl. If you could speak to some of the numbers and turnout. Thank you.
Yes, for this fall's AWWA tour that took place during their education symposium, it actually wrapped up their whole conference. We had 125 people attending that live facility tour. For our school tours, we typically have about 30 students participating on the teacher's Zoom account.
How does that compare to when you did it in person?
I can speak to that. Thank you. Yes, so when we did it in person, that last time was our 2020 or fiscal year 1920. Our fiscal year 2019-2020, and we had about 1,100 attendees attend.
So when you do an event in person, you have about 1,100. When you do a virtual event, you'll have about 125. So that's not that's a fairly big difference in magnitude and turnout at an event.
Daryl, can you address that? These are that's not apples to apples, but just go ahead and explain.
Yes, during the Water Harvest Festival, we do conduct ongoing tours, and the tour numbers per tour group can range from 10 people to 25 to 30 at a time as they rotate through with their tour guide. the one factor that we have to consider moving forward, potentially with a in-person event, are the CDC and LA County health guidelines for large outdoor events. Currently, we do realize that over the summer, things may change depending on which way the COVID infection rates go. But currently, the limitations put on outdoor events are currently up to 100 for outdoor events. It can increase to 300 if participants can prove vaccination or testing status within, testing negative within 72 hours. There's also going to be lots of social distancing considerations that we're going to have to take into account, such as family groups have to remain 6 feet from each other. That's the same whether they're sitting down and listening or participating in a stage event, or when they're seated at our outdoor eating area, for example. So we don't know exactly what the capacity is going to be come October, but we'll have to take that all into consideration if the directors want to move towards an in-person event. The capacity for our event may be much smaller, and we may not be able to accommodate the standard 1,000 plus attendees come the fall.
Okay, is there anything further?
Mr. President, if Director Alvarez is finished, Mr.
Are you
President.
finished, Director Alvarez?
I am.
All right, well, thank you. Director Gray.
Yeah, thank you. This item was discussed extensively in committee, and this is information. Maybe Director Alvarez was not there as part of the discussion, but this is not for action today, correct?
That's what it looks like. It's on here for
just for information. And what I recall is that some of the questions that Director Alvarez had in terms of what would a virtual event look like, I think that was the direction to staff to bring that back to committee for the discussion. So I'm just kind of confused as to what we're trying to do relative to this item today, because information, unless Director Alvarez was not there and he's just asking questions, but this is not an item for action today. But direction was given to staff, as I recall, was to come back and provide some input as to what a virtual event would look like, because we had extensive discussion about this in the public health guidelines and so forth. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Any Director Deere, I see your mic is lit.
Yeah, I was going to try to recommend that we move on this item so that we could, so staff would have time to do whatever they're going to have to do. But I can see now we're going to hold off till next time, so I have nothing to say. Thank you.
Well, okay. All right, anyone else?
This is the Director.
Houston?
Yeah, this is Houston real quick.
Yeah.
Well, I was a little confused. It was on the agenda today as well, because I did understand I was not at that committee meeting and it had been discussed, but then it looked like it was going to come back to the committee again. So I don't know why it's on this agenda today. So I'm confused, just like Director Gray is. But by all means, I don't mind having the discussion. I personally am in favor of having an in-person event. I think I said that at a previous meeting. I think by October, we will all be in a better position, and I would imagine hopefully the county will allow us to do things, but I don't see why we could not anticipate that we could have some sort of in-person event. So for myself, that's my position on it, whether it's decided today or in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I want to now put my 2 cents in, since everyone else has. This item should come back to the board as an action item with all the things that are in it, so that we can vote it up or down. Because I have my views on it, and the views that I've heard before haven't changed. So I want to vote yay or nay, and how I'm voting. So we can just put this to rest. I mean, we shouldn't be trying to figure out what we're going to do when we've already kind of indicated what we want to do. So I think you should agendize this for an action on the next agenda.
Yeah, we'll bring it back for an action on the next committee.
the next committee, you're gonna do that? And that would be when?
May 13th.
May 13th. And although there are only a few board members on the, 2 board members on that committee, but every board member can speak on the item at that committee, correct?
Correct. And
Okay.
any action can be moved as long as we have a quorum, which we didn't have at the last PI committee.
When you say action at that meeting, it's just an action to move it forward to the board. Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay,
That's correct, President Williams.
all right. Is that clear enough for staff?
Yep, crystal
Okay.
clear.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, because there's no action today, so we move on to the next agenda item, which is the item 10, which is the receive and file. Any item to be pulled? Hearing
If
none,
not,
then I will.
I move to receive and file item 10, 1 through 12.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we receive and file, approve the items 1 through 12. All right, let's vote on that. Director Gray,
Yes.
Director Houston,
Yes.
Director Alvarez,
Aye.
Director Deere,
Yes.
Director Williams, and I'm an aye. So let's move on to the next item. It's approved. Next item, General Manager's Activities Report.
Thank you, President Williams. So we have a few items to go over. Just a reminder that on April 28th at 1 p.m., there's a special board meeting, which is for the Customer Agency Workshop, like we have every year, and that will be posted by staff here on the next 24 hours. Also, of note, the Water is Life Student Art Contest, don't forget to vote. You should have all received a link from an email from Julie or a communication from Julie to weigh in on the this very important voting assignment. There's 439 submissions, a lot of interest, a lot of participation. Jumping to something completely different, the Baldwin Hills Conservancy Governing Board meeting. I had a request from David McNeil, who's the executive director there, to address that meeting on the 21st. We'll get back to him today, and that's regarding their interest in the Kenneth Hahn project, which is more or less on hold. A few weeks back, March 24th, we had that line break over at Top Golf project at the golf course right next to the Ed C. Little plant. So we'll be bringing back a report very shortly on the cost recovery for that event. I know Margaret is tracking all the costs with operations separately. So we will be bringing that back to the board's attention, how that's progressing. We did have quite a few meetings around Brewer de Salter. We had one on April 1st with staff from WRD, 3 staff members and some of our staff confirming and expressing their interest in the Brewer de Salter. And also they gave us an update on the brackish reclamation and replenishment project that's under consideration, and give us a status update on that. And we'll be following that closely. As you know, we've recently formed 3 ad hoc committees. One of them is in full swing. That's the Brewer de Salter ad hoc committee with Director Houston, Director Alvarez. We've met on April 1st, April 12th, April 15th, April 26th this morning, and we'll be meeting with WRD's ad hoc committee and our committee here Thursday, April 29th. We do have another ad hoc committee that started up. We certainly had a prep meeting on Friday, the 23rd, for the City of Los Angeles ad hoc committee with Director Alvarez and Director Gray. And we have a meeting scheduled for, I believe, this Wednesday at Wednesday at 10:30 with them. And we have another prep meeting on that this evening here at 5 o'clock with Director Alvarez and Director Gray. The meeting itself with the City of LA will be on April 28th this week at 10:30 a.m. Let's see here. We did, there's been a lot of discussion, at least around the AB 1195, and we will be bringing that back. I just want to make note of that. We bring that back to the Water Policy and Legislative Committee on May 18th. I think Director Deere had requested that item be agendized. The board retreat. So we do have a date and a place and a time. So it's Saturday, May 15th at the Water Education Center at the Ed C. Little Water Recycling Facility. And it's scheduled for 9 a.m. to 5. We have confirmed a facilitator, and Julie will be having that facilitator coordinate with the board members in preparation for that individually, virtually, for that retreat. And you'll also be getting an email today from Julie after this meeting about any topics, your top 2 or 3 topics for consideration for the board president for the agenda for that retreat. We did hear mention, by the way, of virtual success. There was a great one here on Wednesday, April 21st, the fire escaping class with President Williams up front and center in that. I got almost 100 people in attendance, really well attended, and by all accounts was very successful. And another thing on the PI end, you'll hear a report later on at the May committee, but we had an ad campaign highlighting water use efficiency programs for Earth Day, which ran the week of April 19th. Let's see, we mentioned the customer agency workshop this week, Met Caucus next week, May 5th at 12:30 p.m. Some upcoming conferences, just as a reminder, Aqua 21 Spring Conference, virtual conference, May 12, 13. See, we have 1 director attending so far. Registration is closing soon, I'm told. AWWA ACE 2021 virtual conference, June 14 through 17. So if you're interested, please let us know so we can get you registered. And then we have the AWWA 2021 Membrane Technology Conference in West Palm Beach, Florida, July 19 through 2022. Registration is open for that one. That concludes my report, President Williams and board members.
Any questions?
I just had one question, Mr. President.
Yes.
Pat, when are they going to start delivering the rain barrels? I don't think I've heard when they're going to start delivering.
I just had that question for Gus, and where did DJ? If you're still there.
Yes, I am, Patrick.
So
The delivery of rain barrels has already begun. So we utilize consultants not only to help us organize, that's the South Bay Environmental Services Center, to take down all of the applications and organize them. And then what we do is we bundle the deliveries up so that when we send our delivery driver out, they try to hit one area. So we've been doing it multiple days per week, and we are actually on pace now to easily give away the 1,000 rain barrels that we dedicated to this fiscal year. And so the program's been doing quite well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
And just real quick, on Thursday, we typically send an update as far as the amount of applications we get. I'll have them provide the information as to how many have already been delivered, and then maybe a little bullet or two about the delivery process as well. So you'll have that.
Okay, great. Thank you, EJ.
Yes, Steve, did you have a question?
No, I was just preparing for number 12, General Counsel's report.
Okay, before we get there, I just want to say thanks to you, Director Houston. I followed your lead on the Firescape workshop to introduce that to PB, and they were very pleased with that. So I didn't realize how extremely important that firescaping knowledge is for the residents of the area. So they were pleased, I'm pleased, and West Basin is pleased. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, and thank you, Mr. President. And I'll just comment on that too, because I think we had 60 or 70 when we did it back in Malibu or Topanga, whichever one we targeted that particular time I was on there. And you know, the speaker, of course, he's phenomenal, but I think it showed too, then it went to your area and other areas. It's a great model. So I think that should probably be something that we do somehow annually with the residents in those certain areas. So I'm glad to hear it went well. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Steve, it's your turn.
Yeah, I'll just briefly report that a summary of our services are in your inbox for the past month, and that we do have a closed session today as described on items 14A and 14B.
Okay. So that takes us to director's comments, future agenda items. Or do we want to move to recess and go into closed session?
Well, this is Houston, the AB 1234.
Yep.
Yes.
So I usually report them in person. So if it's okay, I'll say it now.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just on the AB 1234 for me, the general manager mentioned it. So our ad hoc committee, Brewer to Salter, we've definitely been moving and meeting. So on April 1st, on April 12th, and on April 15th, those thus far, I put those on my roster of meetings I attended. And then also on April 13th, I virtually attended the Metropolitan Board meeting. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else caring to report out now? Hearing none, then we will recess into closed session. So Mr. General Manager, would you give us the instructions here?
Yeah, let me give you the instructions. I think Steve may want to say something. So this is a little bit different than normal. You will be getting off this call, logging off of this go-to meeting, I should say, and then you have instructions to get into a closed session of the regular board meeting. You will need to log into that, and we will conduct closed session, but in a go-to meeting format. And we will, when we're done, we will exit that, and the General Counsel will report out, and we will log back into this meeting that you're on, the open session, to finish things up. So Steve, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you, Pat. I was just going to add that if you look in your inboxes, it's an email from, I think it says West Basin Board Secretary. At about 11 o'clock this morning is when Julie sent it out. And you'll see there's a link in there for the closed session under go-to meeting.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay, we'll recess to closed session.
Yeah, make sure you log off because you can't be on two meetings at the same time to go to. Thank you.
Hi, Margaret.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Now, Megan just open and close here.
So we've got two of your directors.
Aye.
We need one more. No, we'll give them a break. We're missing Scott and Desi.
And your general manager.
And the general manager. Well, there's Desi.
Are we all here?
We're waiting for Houston.
Well, Mr. Chairman, all we're going to do is close the meeting, aren't we?
That's right.
We can do it without Houston.
Yes, we can. But we'll give him a break. Come on, Scott.
Patrick will be joining you in just a moment.
Okay. Who's that? Scott. Okay. We need Patrick.
He'll be right here.
Okay. I am now going to reconvene the board meeting, and we'll now have a report out of closed session by our general counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The board met pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 to discuss two items of existing litigation, Rastegar versus West Basin and LA Waterkeeper versus West Basin. A report was given to the board on both matters and instruction was given to staff. That concludes my closed session report.
Thank you. We have exhausted the agenda. So our next scheduled meeting will be April 28th at a time to be determined. And so this concludes our meeting. We have no other items on the agenda. We are adjourned.
Bye-bye.